Thank you. We have a guest in our committee, Madam Diane James from UKIP. The floor is yours.
Madam Chair, I'm very, very grateful for you allowing me to come today and to ask a question. I've been interested by the two previous speeches. I'm going to put my cards on the table and say that I'm very positive about the aspect of a Brexit for the United Kingdom. And I would love to believe that there was a possibility of something better for Europe. It's not something better for Europe, it should be something better for the European Union, but regretfully the Eurosceptics don't feel that that is possible. But the letter from Mr Tusk to David Cameron, which I have a copy and I'm sure other people can also access, and my question is predicated on that, and it touches on some of the points that have been made. And that is, if I could ask for some feedback, given that the changes will require clear and unambiguous and quite possibly very complex changes to the treaties, does anybody here disagree with these propositions or might like to comment? Firstly, that the best that can be put before the United Kingdom electorate at the forthcoming referendum is a promise that at some unspecified date in the future the treaties will be changed to ensure that these requirements be given full legal effect. Secondly, that the process will effectively require the agreement of the Council, in some instances referenda in member states to approve the treaty changes, and ratification of the treaty changes by all 28 member states in accordance with their individual constitutional agreements and requirements. But in essence, and in very plain language, Brexit, is it actually just an IOU without any due date for repayment, not legally binding, and without any guarantee that it will ever be enacted? Because that is fundamentally what the United Kingdom wants to achieve and needs to see. But regretfully, our politicians aren't being honest with us, and I think there is if you like, an onus on the European Union and this committee to try and give some clear steer. And I'm very grateful for you taking my questions. Thank you.
I think a little bit of context is important. Why is there a referendum coming up? It's for a number of reasons, but one of them is to do with the management by the Prime Minister of the deep divisions within the Conservative Party about Europe. They are very badly divided, and the Prime Minister, in his capacity as party leader of the Conservative Party, said before the British general election, he said, after the election, we will try and improve the European Union, reform it, and then let the people decide in a referendum. So that in the run-up to the election, he could attenuate the internal divisions within the Conservative Party, because they could leave this issue to fight later. It's possible that the Prime Minister didn't even think that he would ever have to deliver on this, because I think even David Cameron didn't think he would gain an absolute majority of seats in the British general election, and this is exactly the sort of thing that could have been negotiated away in a coalition agreement with the Liberal Democrats or whatever and quietly dropped. But he did win an absolute majority, so he has to deliver. But he hadn't originally thought in great detail about what demands for reform to put on the table. And he has had to find something to ask for that comes somewhere between the trivial and the impossible. It can't be trivial, because that wouldn't convince any of his backbenchers back home. It can't be impossible, because he would not get agreement from the rest of the European Union. That has been his challenge. And he's come up with these four things, none of which, by the way, include any opt-out from any policy area. There's not a demand for Britain to cease participating in transport policy, agriculture, fisheries, whatever. They're not trying to do that. But you all know the basket of four. And the point was made by Joe Leinen that do these reforms matter when it comes to the referendum? People are not going to make up their mind in function of the little adjustments or whatever it is that Cameron comes back with. And that's probably true for, I think Diane James might even agree with me, for 90% of the electorate or something like that. But it is crucial for 10 to 15% of the electorate, including the middle ground of the Conservative Party. Cameron needs to come back with something that looks credible, because that will swing that segment of the public. He needs to come back with something. If it's a declaration along the lines agreed by the European Council in June 2014 that says ever closer union does not mean a centralised superstate, has flexibility, etc., etc., fine, or at least relatively easy to agree, perhaps. But if he insists on rewriting the treaty or having a special protocol, much more difficult. And that's true for almost everything he's put on the table. The exception is the demand for a limit of 4 years before anyone moving to the UK can benefit from certain welfare benefits. And there it's not clear. I mean, he could do it unilaterally by UK legislation, but he would have to do it in a non-discriminatory way if it's not going to be challenged in the courts. So he'd have to say even UK citizens cannot access benefits for 4 years, which might cause him a few domestic political difficulties. Or he could say, let's try and change the EU legislation. That would have to come through the European Parliament. Or he has to do it by a protocol to the treaty, or an amendment to the treaty, more likely a protocol, as Diane James said, to be promised now and ratified later. That's not actually a big problem. That's what was done for Ireland, what was done for Denmark in the past. You can do that. But the degree of difficulty goes up with each of these, and we don't know how he's going to deal with that. That's probably the single most difficult thing. So that's where we are, and as has been pointed out, the Labour Party, for the record, has said that, and we were unanimous at our party conference, we will be campaigning to stay in the European Union unconditionally. Whatever Cameron does with his changes, some of which we may not like,